In a fiery homily in early September of this year, Father Altier took aim at how society at large was handling the COVID 19 crisis. 3 days later, the Twin Cities media heard his message and took aim at him. A variety of tactics were levied to discredit his claims. Channel 9, the Fox affiliate, brought in a doctor and said he was endangering the people by telling them false information. The Minneapolis Star Tribune also brought in an expert who said Altier should be disciplined for spreading deadly information. But they went one step further and insinuated that the conservative Catholics who would be receptive to his message were extremists. This particular situation is a perfect illustration of the difference in mindset between Christianity and secular society. One group realizes heaven is the endgame, while the other puts all of its faith in this current life and world. In March of 2020, when the novel coronavirus entered the collective mind of the United States, precautions were taken for what was perceived as the common good of society. Stay at home orders were issued, social distancing measures were suggested, and eventually masks were mandated. Additionally, travel was restricted, and the push for a cure, mainly a vaccine, was initiated. On the surface, this seems like a pretty complete list of action to take. However, there was an obvious absence. It doesn't take very long at all, and one realizes that every single item mentioned here is only about the physical body and completely ignores the spiritual component that is present in all of us. The ignorance of this spiritual aspect of human life turned into outright assault when the churches were closed, public masses were canceled, and the sacraments were put on hold. There was a collective call to keep people healthy. However, in a society that is becoming increasingly secular, there is a complete blindness to the fact that we are spiritually sick. We are body and soul composites. Months have passed, and in many ways, our bodies have remained robust, but our souls have become lethargic from the lack of use and infected by spiritual sloth. When God's authority is forgotten, new authorities arise. The Cardinal of Confusion, Father James Martin, used his gospel of heresy and his mob of disciples to force Bishop Callahan of La Crosse to silence Father James Altman. Outside the walls of the church, the people have elected a new vicar of crisis, Pope Anthony Fauci, the doctor. Dr. Fauci was seen as a trusted expert on the coronavirus. However, his approach and his attitudes were very much devoid of God and consistency. When questioned about whether it was okay to receive Holy Communion during the pandemic, he said no. When asked about if it were alright to be intimate with strangers met through Tinder, he said it was permissible if people weighed the risk. When Fauci saw there was a risk of having his newfound authority and limelight undermined, he began to revise some of his earlier advice to the people. Notably, his stance on face coverings. Initially, he told people that the only mask worth wearing was the N95 mask, but we should let the health professionals on the front lines have these. Later on, once people seemed to be getting back to normal, he heavily promoted face coverings of any kind without really questioning their effectiveness. This shift in mindset made it fairly obvious that face masks were more of a symbolic tool to keep the coronavirus on people's minds than to provide any substantial protection from the disease. Recommendations from Dr. Fauci and other secular experts like him were taken seriously by church authorities so much to the point that it hindered parish life when people were allowed to gather again. Seating capacity was reduced, age restrictions were put in place, and even restrictions on liturgical participation, such as singing, were enacted. Back in Minnesota, Father Altier's bishop consulted secular experts with views contrary to the church to fact check and discipline the priest. We are all aware that COVID 19 is a crisis. However, a much more sinister pandemic is afoot, a crisis of faith. We will all die bodily from one thing or another. However, spiritual death is not something we need or want to experience. Rather than putting all of our faith in a human doctor, let us turn to the divine physician and cooperate with his grace to cure our souls.